I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet?
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
CJ, I was taught a long time ago, you never know who listens or reads or pays attention to your work. And I like to think that enough people pay attention to our podcast. They enjoy you. I think they might like me, but definitely they enjoy you. So I imagine whenever you come across like really cool people who say like they're into your podcast, like it must be such a fun thrill, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's still surreal because, you know, most of our experience with this is just us recording in a private Zoom room with producer Nick. And then, you almost, there's a separation between who's consuming it. And so at the NHL Board of Governors meeting this week, I did find myself quite surprised when one of the governors for a team, I won't mention any names to dox the person because I didn't ask their permission, but needless to say, someone who's had a tremendous amount of success in the tech world and is, partial owner of an NHL team came up, introduced himself to me and said he's a huge fan of the show. That I'll put that on the things that are unexpected because yes, we know people are listening and watching, but you wouldn't necessarily expect someone in, that's in the exclusive company of the meeting like that one coming to say hi to me and saying it's, nice to meet me and that he loves our show. I mean, it's how cool is that?
That is pretty cool, but it is also just kind of funny considering like that person's position. It's like, hey, congrats. Not congrats, but hey, thanks so much for liking our show. We also would like to know why the players don't make as much money or some other gripe we might have about people in his position. But at the same time, pretty cool.
Yeah, but he's not individually responsible for that either, right? I mean,
that too.
And there's lots of reasonable people that understand. I mean, we're just reflecting one specific set of views that we have from the people we talk to, the collection of our experiences. Like we're not saying we know everything, and even this person who gets to sit in that meeting doesn't know everything. I mean, we're in the open exchange of ideas, and thankfully we live in a place where that's allowed. And anyway, that was pretty cool. I've got to say, like, it was actually like kind of a bit surreal. Just to have that realization, because again, sometimes I know my dad's listening, but other than that, you're never totally sure from episode to episode.
So I know we're keeping this guy private, but does that guy become the coolest person you've heard say that they listen to the podcast?
For me, it probably does. Yeah. I mean, I think just partially because it's so unexpected. I mean, let me set the scene. We're at the Breakers Hotel, 120 plus year old hotel, a place that the Rockefellers used to stay down in Palm Beach, Florida. Put it this way, not the kind of place I would normally hang out. And so you do feel a little out of place there, somewhat, creeping around the lobby, doing what we have to do, waiting for these meetings to break up. And so when one of the people that is more accustomed to that lifestyle and at that level, comes over and wants to meet you, I mean, it's usually in reverse, right? It's usually me stopping someone to introduce myself or to have a comment about what's going on with their team or what have you. So it felt like a roles reverse kind of moment.
That's really funny. But also really cool that we were able to get that endorsement. We have a bunch of topics we need to get to for this week's show. And I know we'll get to You Can Bet That eventually. We do have to mention the Alexander Ovechkin goal chase off the top. If you remember an episode we did a couple of months back with Alexander Ovechkin and the awkwardness of following the goal chase while also thinking of his political affiliations with Vladimir Putin, notably. I mean, you can go back to that conversation. I thought it was a really good discussion about how awkward it is to kind of see a player of his stature affiliated with who he's affiliated with. And it's not going to get any easier as Alexander Ovechkin has hit the 800 goal plateau. I've noticed that a few people, maybe saying come around is not the best way of saying it, but have kind of warmed back up to the goal chase. I'm just curious, like, where you're at with looking at it and covering it and maybe even celebrating it.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with all of it, honestly. My views really are unchanged from whenever we did have that topic, I think shortly after the invasion of Ukraine, because I'm mindful of the fact that there's still civilians in Ukraine having bombs dropped on the places where they live and work and where their children go to school, initiated by Russia, which is a country run by Vladimir Putin, which still appears on Alex Ovechkin's Instagram story. And so I'm willing to grant some grace in general. I'm not even expecting someone in his shoes necessarily to come out and speak out about his own country, but I still feel as though, he's standing. He's not just sitting idly by. He's standing with the leader of that country, and he's done so for a long time. Going back many years, very publicly. And so I do find it for me. I can't get as excited about this as I normally would be. And I really feel kind of awkward about it. Like, it's because so many of our colleagues are just moving on. I can tell you this: Alex Ovechkin standing in Europe is dust. Like, we're a long way from Europe physically, and so I think that's, we might not realize that, but this was arguably for a time maybe the NHL's most marketable star, certainly in the top handful, basically for his entire career. That's especially true in European countries where the game is celebrated and enjoyed. And I can tell you that there is very few people that would live in Sweden or Finland or Czechia, other places where hockey's popular, and that are taking any joy in seeing his success now. And so just because we're removed from distance, I don't think that gives us the ability just pretend it's not happening. And so, yeah, I find it awkward. Just because his tie to Putin specifically is so close. I'm not saying that every Russian should be punished everywhere, because we know that, some of these are very young players that there's even been a player like the one who plays Nikita Zadorov where you are, Julian. He actually spoke out against the war, in Russia. So, I'm not saying he shouldn't be able to participate in events. He's kind of done what he can do. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting period, because it's clear, he's very close now to passing Gordie Howe, 1 goal from tying him on the all-time list, and then 2 goals from being the second all-time leading goal scorer in NHL history. There's going to be a period, but in this chase towards Wayne Gretzky is going to take a couple years. But it's a huge milestone. I loved watching Ovechkin as a player throughout his career. He was unquestionably a breath of fresh air for the league when he came in. Super exciting, sold lots of tickets, created fans. But I think that, where this has gone now, it's just hard to look past what's going on in the world. I sometimes people go to sports for a distraction from the world. I can't distract myself from that and sit here and say, oh, how awesome it is that he's marching up to the NHL record book.
Wow. I have to say, like, I think that's well said, first off. And two, like, yeah.
Well, you don't have to agree with me, like, this is just my view. Like, I just think it's important to note, like, this guy was one of the NHL's biggest stars, and he has no platform in Europe now. Like, there's no one would touch him with a 10-foot pole. No one would put him on a billboard or a commercial. Like, he's persona non grata in those other European countries. Now, he might not care about that, but I'm just saying this is the facts and the reality of the situation. I mean, those countries weren't going to participate in a potential World Cup in 2024 because if Russia was going to be there, if a player like Alexander Ovechkin was going to be in the tournament, those countries were going to say, fine, we're going to sit this out. And I understand in North America, there's a desire to want to distance yourself from that, to just be like, well, that's the kind of their problem. But the reality of the world is, if you don't stand, I mean, what all those countries are thinking, Julian, is if they just go into Ukraine, what's stopping an invasion of Finland, which shares a massive border with Russia, for the same sort of nebulous reasons? What's stopping them from going to Sweden? If this is allowed to happen unchecked, there's some real world consequences, right? And so I know the NHL would just rather be in the business of making money. Like, I understand how we are where we are, but us as individuals don't have to. We can make our own choice about how we view these things.
We do. It's just that it's just the fact that it's Alexander Ovechkin, who has been a face of the league for years, and the fact that he could very well break this all-time goal scoring record, and he has the support not just of media, but like people are asking Gordy's son Mark Howe what he thinks of all of this, and Wayne Gretzky wants this to be broken. Like, this is very difficult, I think, for people who may have reckoned with that months ago, and then all of a sudden now they see him at 800. It's like, oh yeah, right. Like this is fun, and maybe this isn't the greatest analogy, but like, we were looking at the World Cup in Qatar a couple of weeks ago, and all of the human rights violations and everything going on. And now, weeks removed from that, people are saying it's arguably one of the greatest tournaments ever. Like, after a while, and I'm not saying people should do this, after a while, what we look at and think is like, oh man, this feels very awkward. It happens so much in sports where we just see the fun things that make sports fun, and we immediately forget about the seedy underbelly of what makes it gross. And this could be just one of those situations.
And this is why powerful people that are doing unsavory things want to align with athletes and want to align themselves with sports, because it does give them sort of a social credibility. And that's what this is all about, really. Like, this is, that's why, like, I can't believe he still has that Instagram picture. And I know, like, the point might be made, well, if he changed it now, we'd all notice. It's like, well, yeah, maybe it's still time to change it. But I mean,
but also, I want to just add to that, because I know I've spoken with Tarek El-Bashir about this from The Athletic, and he's said that, like, like if he does something like that puts his family like in it could put his family in danger, right? Like, that is something, at least to his sympathy, like, he has to consider if he does any type of backtracking on that. I'm not saying being affiliated with Putin is okay. It is something that has to be considered in all this, right?
I suppose. I mean, I don't know if that's true. Like, I guess. Is there like a long list of famous Russians that have had their families attacked because of this?
Don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that's a fair question. I don't know. I can't answer that question. But I know, and we both know, that of all Russian athletes, you don't get any more prominent than Alexander Ovechkin. Easily.
Right. Well, and
easily.
The fact we're even having to have this discussion just shows how complicated the situation is, much more than, oh, look at, he's still scoring goals. And look at, I used to be, before this happened, I used to celebrate him, all of his successes like that. Like I don't want to, but over time your views can change on something. And
absolutely.
I don't find any joy in this. And honestly, I'm a giant hockey nerd. I've given my whole life to this sport. I would love to just be watching the games Thursday and Saturday and waiting for him to pass Gordie Howe. And like, I would love to do that, but I just don't feel, it doesn't feel right to me. Like, there's just something in my stomach that just, it doesn't add up. I think it's disingenuous to a huge number of players in the NHL that probably have problems with this too. And yeah, so that's kind of my piece. I mean, I don't know what else can be done, because obviously the league's not going to all of a sudden not allow Russians to play if they've allowed them to play through all this. There is a movement at the Olympic level to have Russian athletes return to the Paris Games, the Summer Games in 2024, which I think will open the door for the NHL to have a 2025 World Cup that includes Russia. Maybe some adjustments to whether the flag or the national anthem are used. I mean, we'll see how that shakes down. So, like, what can you do? I mean, he's allowed to play, and obviously he can still perform at a high level in terms of scoring goals. But I think that does take some of the joy, the excitement, the celebration around it away from me. I don't think that's the case for a lot of my colleagues. Just looking around, seeing the stories being written and the tweets. I mean, I feel maybe like I'm a little bit on an island here among North American journalists, but that's okay. I mean, it's just my view. As I say, they have the right to view it their way too.
Absolutely. And I think you explained your point very well. So yeah, at least hopefully everyone listening or watching can understand the dilemma that comes with the Alexander Ovechkin goal chase, at least for both of us, right? I still think it exists. And I think CJ's point explains that. I want to just mention one more thing before we take our little break into sports interaction here. We have to mention that the Leafs are good, because we can't just mention when the Leafs are bad. I think you were the one who mentioned in our group chat that they're on a run of like 15, 1-4. Is it time for us to call them a? I can't say that word.
Jigga. I'm not, as I said previously, I'm not using that word, but it's definitely time. I mean, I think people are paying attention, but they deserve some credit for this stretch. I mean, you're right. If we're gonna hit them when they're 4-4-2 out of the gate, well, then when they immediately then go 15-1-4, I think we should point out that they're a Stanley Cup contender. I think that's how it is. I mean, look, they've had so many injuries. Like it's been impressive. I'll go that far. Like you're seeing a little bit more out of them, I think, than even some previous seasons. Obviously, the goaltending bets have paid off so far. We'll see how that plays out over the next 50 plus games. There's still a lot of runway, for Ilya Samsonov and Matt Murray, but they've both been great when they've been healthy. They're getting scoring from everyone. Mitch Marner just casually puts up a point every night for more than a month. The Leafs are good, and will be really interesting when we get into sort of January, February, and start to figure out where they're going to allocate their remaining cap space in terms of trade deadline acquisitions. Because there's no question to me they're going to go out and get the best player or players they can, given the cap space they have, and they're going to load up to the degree they can. I mean, like a lot of teams in the league, they can't go make 7 trades, I don't think, because perhaps they don't need 7 items, but also there's just not a lot of room to maneuver. But they're going to be adding and trying to win the damn thing after, tripping in the first round for 7 straight years.
One of my, our friend of the network, Tic Tac Tomar, on another podcast that we do together, is really advocating for a left winger. Do you see the Leafs being active in that position?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been an open sort of hole they've had the whole year, the second line left wing spot, if you call it. I mean, they've juggled the top 2 lines a little bit, but Nick Robertson got a run there. Unfortunately, he's now injured, but never really grabbed it when he was there. We've seen Alex Kerfoot play there. I think in a perfect world, the Leafs would like him on the 3rd line or even the 4th line, so not have him in the top 6. Dennis Malgin's seen some time there. I mean, it really has been a rotating cast of players. Maybe the solution ends up being internal, but I think more than likely you see some sort of external option added. And look, we could have a few notable forwards on the trade market. I'm not going to now just go throw every name out there, but we know who the UFAs are going to be. Whether it's maybe someone like Ryan O'Reilly could add to that mix, or Bo Horvat. There's a situation brewing in Vancouver you might have heard about. I mean,
we'll get to him.
And I know those players can play center, and so maybe you're shifting someone else to that spot. But I mean, basically what we're talking about is adding another. I don't think it necessarily has to be a pure left winger. You're looking to add another top 6 forward so that you can, have a better mix on the second line specifically. And so, there's some players to go out and get. And that'll, I mean, what this winning run has done, it's just bought them time, right? I mean, Kyle Dubas hasn't felt any pressure to make any moves for all the injuries the Leafs have had, and they're among the most injured teams in the league. Colorado probably being the one that's notably ahead of them in terms of man games lost. But they've been able to get by with their depth, and then I think that they'll look to improve, at the top end. But they can just wait and see how it plays out. Wait and see who's available come February. What makes sense cap wise. It gets easier to add players from a cap position the later into the season you are. So, none of those guys, I don't think the Leafs won't at least be having sort of due diligence conversations on. And I think it's going to be pretty exciting. Everyone says the season doesn't matter as we head into the season in Toronto, but then you actually see it. I mean, people are getting excited. I mean, you lose 1 game in regulation out of 20. That's a quarter of the season. 1 regulation loss.
I get it. But like, I've seen this before.
They're the only team. I'll say this: they're the only team in the league that hasn't given up 5 goals in a game. I believe they've lost almost all of their games by 1 goal, except for the odd empty netter. But they've been dominant in any way you want to measure it. Even more dominant than previous seasons. Like that's what's different. It's another year older for Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin. Like neither of those guys played when the games mattered last year in the playoffs. And it looks like they're both taking a step forward. I mean, there's reason, and look, it's 2 totally different goaltenders too. And I don't know what your views of those goalies are, but like, it's a different team. I mean, it's the same stars, but there's a lot of differences around them. And, I know you feel like you're watching things on loop, and it's hilarious too. They have this run, but the one team in their division that's better than them looks like the best team in the league, the Boston Bruins, right now. But it's going to be exciting around here. I think even Steve Dangle's getting jacked up.
It's always going to be exciting. And look, I know some people are going to look at me and be like, "Oh, you're a hater," but like, there's a part of me that wants to see the Leafs actually succeed and not have them be like a joke every year, and not have people look at Kyle Dubas and be like, "Oh, you're just a computer boy." But also, the Leafs have done enough over the last decade for me to be like, okay, I need to see y'all do it in the playoffs. So seeing that they're doing well, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I think there's a reason why that the Leafs are playing as well as they are. And aside from Daryl Sutter saying that they're like the best team in the league, you're not seeing a universal amount of adoration and praise for this organization and how well they've been playing, because we've all seen this movie before where they play really well, and then the playoffs, they don't get out of the first round. They could do it this year. This could be the year where they actually do it. But I think some people are rightfully jaded about the fact that they play really well the regular season and give people hope, and then they lose in Game 7. Like, I think that's more than fair.
A lot of people probably feel like they've touched the stove, right? Like they've said it in years. This is the year for the Leafs, and then it ends familiarly in a familiar manner. So maybe that's where it comes from. But anyway, I'm comfortable saying that they're really damn good, and I could see them go. I don't think it's crazy at all to think they're going to go on a run. This playoffs, it's not going to be easy. It's not guaranteed. Look, it's not easy or guaranteed any year for any team. I mean, Colorado had great teams before they finally broke through last year. Ones that fell short, ones that blew series leads, the same sorts of things we're talking about for Toronto. Nothing is guaranteed, but I'm just saying give them some credit too, because they have lost players consistently and found ways to stay at the top of the league. And I think that they've been a well-managed team. Again, just my view. And like the computer boy narrative you brought up, that's just lazy. Like that's not, I get that it's out there. It's like sort of a meme type of thing,
and I don't agree with it.
But like, I don't think, right. Look at Kyle Dubas' job is to build a team capable of winning the Stanley Cup. I get it. If they don't win the Stanley Cup or if they don't advance in the playoffs, he'll lose his job. But objectively, he's built a first-class organization from top to bottom in the way they do things off the ice. I hear this from other teams all the time. This is not just my opinion. This is the opinion of other people that look at how they handle sports science, how they manage their players, how they constantly find value at the bottom of the lineup consistently every single year, let free agents walk rather than get tied into potentially poor contracts and still win a lot of games. There's this, I was around, put it this way. I'm an old man, Julian. I was around for the previous iterations.
Everybody take a drink.
I was around for the previous iterations of management for this team, like a couple of them. It's night and day improvement in the organization. The only place they haven't improved is winning Game 7, but everything else is better. I mean, these guys are the players capable of winning individual awards. They have a cap challenge every year, but still find ways to add at the deadline. Even Mark Giordano, man, like he's 39. We haven't even talked about it. Like he's been awesome for them.
Yeah.
But they got him last year at the deadline when they had no cap space, but found a way to do it. Re-signed him at a crazy value deal, $800,000. And he was playing over 20 minutes a game for 12 games when they had injuries. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of teams that would like to be run as poorly by the computer boys as the Leafs are.
Man, I think, by the way, I just want to say this before we get to you can bet that. CJ, you on one today. You're feeling it today.
I came back from Florida with like a little bit of sickness. Like I just feel like, man, I got like a little bit of combativeness in me, maybe more than normal.
I feel that too. I feel that, and not in like a negative way, like you're pushing back and making it bad for me. Like I just think like I like this. We're gonna have fun today on today's edition of the CJ Show. But first, it's time for You Can Bet That.
You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Brought to you by Sports Interaction. Get in the action and make a play. 19 plus. Please play responsibly.
Welcome to You Can Bet That. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. They have these really cool boosts under their NHL props on the Sports Interaction website. Here's a cool one for this coming Saturday's games. Boosted from 22.00, the Sens, Oilers, Canadiens, Leafs, and the Canucks all win on Saturday. They've boosted that from 22 to 28. maximum bet of $25. That sounds very intriguing to me.
Well, I mean, look, to get any 5 results right, you've got to have the odds to reflect that. I wonder if it could be an all Canadian day. That'd be good for our friends at Hockey Night in Canada if they had all the Canadian teams playing well and winning their games.
Trying to pull up all the different opponents on that day. The Canadians might be in tough because they play against Tampa Bay Lightning, but the Oilers play against the Anaheim Ducks that day. The Flames are not playing that day. It's a rare Saturday off. I'm literally just trying to go through in my
Toronto's
head.
in Washington.
Toronto plays against Washington. The Vancouver Canucks that day. Just stall here as I try to figure out who the opponent is. They play the Jets. Interesting. So at least one Canadian team is going to lose.
Yeah, we know that much. I mean, the cool thing about that is it's all staggered game times too. So like if you play that and then the first one hits, the second one hits, I mean, then you start to get excited, right? Because as it goes along. And then I guess the end of the night, you need Vancouver to pull out 2 points against the Jets.
And the Senators would play the Red Wings on the Saturday. I wonder how well, actually, funny enough, there is a version of this prop bet that says the Senators, Oilers, Canadians, Leafs, and Jets all win on the Saturday. So if you're David Bastel and you're looking at this and you're like, well, hey, wait a minute, what about my Jets? There is that bet, and that's at 24.00. It's still fascinating because basically you might like the first 4 results, but then you got to decide one or the other in the 5th. It's a little cheeky play there. I like that. It's a very cheeky play. It's one of the many cheeky plays you can make at Sports Interaction.
I think I'd take it, but with the Jets end rather than the Canucks in the last game.
Yeah, I might take that Jets one too. If you want any more of these really cool bets and props and parlays and whatnot, don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and best props. Again, sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. So you can tell from CJ's background, he is no longer in Florida, which means you must have so many things to talk about from your time at the Board of Governors meetings this week.
It was a good time. I'm not gonna shy away from that. It was nice to get out of the snow for a couple of days, and I came back. We're getting pounded with a snowstorm today. And it was nice to socially just be there, catch up with a lot of familiar faces. Pretty light set of meetings, I would say. I mean, sometimes you go down to an owners meeting and there's a certain crisis or maybe multiple crises, and there's a little tension kind of in the air, and all of everyone's looking at you like you guys are here just to cause some shit. There wasn't that feeling. So it was a good time, even though of course there's still lots to debate and discuss when that group gets together.
Absolutely. What would you say is the biggest story from all the different things that were said at the Board of Governors meetings? Is it the Canadian World Junior investigation and whatever updates are there on that, or the talk about the play-in for the playoffs? That seemed to have gotten a lot of traction online with the discussion around that.
Well, a potential playoff play-in is the most buzzy for sure. I can cover pretty quickly the update on the Canadian World Junior team. It sounds like
let's do that.
But it sounds like, I think from the outside, there might be some misunderstanding about what's really gone on here. The NHL had basically thought it had completed its investigation. It's talked to the principals involved. It's a third-party investigation too, I should mention. It's not as though Gary Bettman himself is conducting it. But what's happened is the investigators from the London Police Service had come back to the NHL, I think with some new information and some things to follow up on. And so that attributes to maybe, if you want to call it a delay, or the reason why there isn't more clarity here, because there's more diligence being done at this point in time. And I think the possibility of more interviews too, which, have to be coordinated through the NHL Players Association. And so, nothing's happening from the outside too quickly, but doesn't mean things aren't happening behind the scenes. Another important, item I came away with, though, is this idea that, and it's not this isn't to presuppose an outcome here, but even if criminal charges don't end up being laid by the police in London, the NHL still has authority and would potentially consider suspensions or other punishments to some of the individuals involved. And so, while it looks like it's happening in concert in the sense that I don't think the NHL is probably going to come out and say anything publicly until the case in London is wrapped up, there is still room for them to have extra punishment, even if there aren't criminal charges laid. So it's still moving towards the finish. I think Gary Bettman's words were, we're in the home stretch.
Yes.
And that maybe is at least a little bit more clarity for those that have wondered about the story, why it's proceeded at the rate it has. As for the playoff play-in, what's interesting about this story and what I think makes it buzzy is, first of all, people have different opinions on it, but is that so many NHL teams or general managers, and there were a lot of GMs actually at the Board of Governors meeting. It isn't always the case, but there's probably 7 or 8 GMs just off the top of my head there. Well, a lot of those individuals would like to see the playoffs, quote unquote, expanded or a new round added, however we want to phrase this. Gary Bettman remains steadfastly against it. And I actually get his view, quite honestly. I mean, what do we celebrate the most probably about the Stanley Cup playoffs? It's probably the first round, quite honestly. It's not to say there aren't other great rounds, but there's a certain sugar rush to those first week to 10 days of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The games are exciting and unpredictable. And I think his thought is why even mess with the success if that's already working? The counterpoint, of course, is why not capture what we've seen every other major sport do? The NBA, Major League Baseball, they've all added new wrinkles to their playoffs in recent years. And you could get more games, more excitement leading into that first round. I actually don't have a strong opinion on this one. I can see both sides to a degree. What say you, young Mr. McKenzie?
I think it's wild that people are so against this idea. I think the fact that people are saying, oh, well, we have an 82-game season that leads into the playoffs. I'm sorry. I don't think of, and maybe this is just the way I see it, but in other sports, when we see a play-in, I don't see that same view come up a lot when two really good teams could be playing against each other for a playoff spot. I thought about it and talk like Salim Valji and I will talk all the time about the Flames this year and how it's looking more like the Flames and the Oilers might end up battling for a playoff spot more than them playing against each other in a playoff series. Could you imagine if they were in a play-in game or a play-in round? That should be fun. That should be really, really cool. And I guess maybe you might have to configure who might actually be in the first round. Do you give your top seed a bye? Maybe you don't even have to do that. Maybe every other team can still go into the first round as normal. It's just that you change maybe one of the lower seeds and that has to eventually go up against a top seed. It's just the same thing. Not to mention, again, if you make it
hey, wait a minute,
1 game or 3 games, you could get revenue from that.
This is the we have a counterpoint though, right? Because I think it's
absolutely.
It's pretty much accepted that it would be the 7th seed versus the 10th seed, the 8th seed versus the 9th seed, basically
like the NBA does.
To comprise the 2 lowest seeds that get in the playoffs. But last year, I believe there's a 20-point gap between the 8th seed and the 9th seed. How would you feel about a 9th seed team finishing 20 points behind the 8th seed and then knocking them out in a 2 out of 3?
The same way I would feel about an 8th seed losing to beating a 1 seed. You should have gotten the job done. We should have gotten the job done.
Right. Because that is a not insignificant counterpoint. But the other thing too, though, is let's remember last season, and the playoffs were great last year, but the end of the regular season ended on the lamest lame that could ever lame. We had all these games at the end of the year that literally meant nothing. There wasn't even jockeying really for position. Teams were just locked in. The East in particular, we knew who the playoff teams were going to be for 2 months before the end of the season. I think that this would at least create more drama down the stretch, and keep more teams in the race. And, do you know what's actually held it up, at least according to one of my trusted sources, is that the TV partners haven't stepped up in a meaningful way and come to the league and said this will generate X amount of dollars. This is why it will work. This is what it would look like. This, I think it's something that the teams want, some members of the media and fans want, but the dollars and cents aspect of it hasn't been brought to the league in a proper formal way. And I think that's ultimately why it hasn't happened is, Gary Bettman likes the current playoffs, hasn't seen a compelling financial reason to do it. And so I think he's thinking why change something unless, someone says, hey, it could be $200 million or whatever it would be. I don't know what the number would be, but it only stands to reason it'd be exciting. I look, it's well known to loyal listeners of this pod. I'm a big Blue Jays fan. I watch the
Yes.
Blue Jays, but I actually will just watch a wild card baseball game. And I don't watch a random game during the season ever, basically. But something like that gets my attention. And I think the same would hold true if you're a Canadian hockey fan and it's like Minnesota and St. Louis in a play-in game. You probably still flick it on because the stakes would be so high and it'd be interesting and different. You know, you do have to change. I'd still like to see them abolish the divisional playoff format. This is the CJ Island show because I might be on an island there. Like, but I still hate,
Takes.
I just don't like this format. And I understand why they do it, but I think I'd rather see it be a little bit more fair after 82 games and have some, like, I don't know why the conference format needed to be changed. Essentially, I thought that was much more fair. But again, I'm getting off topic.
So moving away from the conference format, just, something was clearly broken there, but hell no, we can't touch anything to do with the playoffs. You're talking about something that should be fixed. Like, I don't get it. It just, and thank you for mentioning the fact that maybe it has not been presented to Gary Bettman in a way that properly explains the financial compensation side of it. Because for me, like, I know for me, if we get a wild card, imagine if it was just one game off, and maybe some people can debate, maybe it should be a 3-game series, 5-game, whatever. But imagine if
I think 3 is the sweet spot.
I think 3 is a sweet spot. But imagine a weekend where we could say, all right, 1 game to decide if you're getting into the playoffs or not. You get doubleheaders, East, West conference games, whatever, throughout a weekend. I don't know about you. You ain't going to find me anywhere else. I want to watch those games. I'm just like you. I will watch like the Milwaukee Brewers play against, I don't know, the Giants in a wild card game. And I'm like, all right, this is fun. Those wild card games we saw this year were really fun in the Major League Baseball playoffs. So I'm really stunned at the fact that, at least in my mentions, so many people were against the idea. It's like, have we not seen what the excitement level can be in these games? Like,
and you could steal the baseball format, and that's one way. This is a good counterpoint to what happens if seed 9 or 10 is way behind. Well, if they have to play all those games on the road, I'm just talking about logistics now.
Absolutely.
So let's say seed 7 and 8 get 3 home games in a potential best of 3. So that other team has to go and win 2 games in your building. I mean, that does at least account for the fact that one team had a better 82 regular season. Because, it's hard to go on the road and win 2 games unless you're the Seattle Mariners coming into Rogers Center and kicking the Blue Jays ass. But sorry, I'm not still bitter.
I understand that for sure.
But, I think that's one way to do it. And then you can maybe have that, say, three games in 4 days. And then, that's also punitive for the team that gets through, because you might have to play 3 games in 4 days extra and then go into the first round. But that's probably proper. That makes up for the difference in being first in the conference, is you're going to get a tired opponent. I look, there's an argument for it. But where we should be applying the heat then, if you're a fan that wants to see this, you need TNT, ESPN, and Sportsnet, the 3 national rights holders in US and Canada, to be, coming up with a solution maybe, or putting some heat on it. That's where I think change comes from, honestly. If this is ever going to happen, or might push it over the top, if those networks can come up with a dollar figure of what this could generate and how that could positively impact revenue. Because look, out of the pandemic, the league is doing all kinds of stuff that it might not have done on this same time frame, like the jersey ads and the helmet ads and the digital dasher boards, and all this stuff is designed to make more money, to make up for the losses in the pandemic. And so if there was a way to convince those at the top of the NHL, it would make the same difference in the playoffs, maybe it happens.
Yeah. I like this discussion, and I like how.
Can I throw a weird one at you?
Go ahead.
So one other thing I heard that at least is like on the minds of some people, and I have to really frame this carefully because I don't think it's by any stretch going to happen at this stage. But there is some thought about what about having the worst 2 teams in the league play each other for the right to draft first overall?
Oh, I am all about it. Let's go. I'm tired of this whole thing where it's like, yeah, let the teams tank or whatever. If we're not about tanking, if we all are going to be like, we don't like to see teams tank, let the damn teams play for it. Let them play for it. I'm all for that.
Now, there might be downstream effects you don't like, because maybe the teams don't unload all their players at the deadline, for example, because they want to have some talent left in the lineup to try to win that last game or whatever that looks like. But basically, we're talking about eliminating the NHL draft lottery and doing something with those bottom teams for a draft pick. I mean, this is what I think there is. Like, it might be tough if you're a player on those teams. You've just gone through a season, which would be a tough season if you're 31st overall or 32nd overall in the league. And then you have to play for your organization to get a draft pick, and that player might be coming in to replace you. Like, that might feel strange, but from interest, I mean, it's almost like a stunt, but maybe that will one day be there. Again, I don't think this is not a front burner issue. I don't believe it was even discussed per se at the Board of Governors, but it's at least an idea that's floating out there around some people in these circles.
Look, I like that idea. Maybe it's a very unpopular take, but I like the idea, especially if everyone is so angry about, teams tanking and all that. I like the idea of teams playing for that number 1 overall pick, and at least having that mean something, and not just have it be this absolute race to the bottom where you could just absolutely suck. If you win for it in the end, I think that'd be pretty cool.
We might have a fascinating race to the bottom this year, and it's actually going to come in. It's going to come into more focus because you've got Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, about to play for Team Canada at the World Junior Championship. Obviously, a lot of eyeballs on that tournament. You got players from Sweden and Russia that are pretty enticing players at the top of that draft, and then you've got already 4 or 5 teams that we know aren't really focused on winning too many games down the stretch. I'll throw Anaheim, Arizona, Chicago, Columbus into that batch. There's probably a few more that could get there. We'll see what happens with San Jose and some others. We're going to get a turtle race in the second half, I think, with those last teams, because there's at least one really big prize, I think, in Bedard in this draft. But actually, from talking to some people that work for teams, they're still not totally sure he's the number 1 pick. Like, there's enough other high-end talents. I'm just saying it's not a 1,000% slam dunk. I think it's probably pretty good. I mean, the last time he played a game and didn't have a point was September 23rd in the WHL, and he's about to probably be the biggest star in the World Junior Tournament. But
hold on, how is he not definitive number 1? I need to know. There's no way.
Look at Adam Fantilli's numbers at Michigan. Let's see what happens with some of this. I think it's Leo Carlson from Sweden and Michkov from Russia.
Yes,
I'm just saying let's see how it plays out down the stretch. Clearly he's in pole position. I'm not trying to create a non-controversy where there isn't one, but I just think that there's still room. Remember, we were talking about kids still, right? Like, a lot of these guys that we're talking about are 17. And so it's December right now. The draft is in late June. So that's 6 months. Like, 6 months when you're only 17, a lot of things can happen developmentally. Like, you could still have a growth spurt or whatever. I'm just saying there's things that can happen in 6 months. If I had to say right now, gun to my head, who's getting picked first overall, of course I'm going Connor Bedard, but I'm not sure it's that clear in all the teams' minds that may hold that pick.
So we go from the controversy to a team that seems to be all about the opposite in the Vancouver Canucks. I just picture this giant wheel behind me, and just imagine there's one behind me. I'm just gonna spin it and just be like, all right, what's the next thing that the Vancouver Canucks have to deal with? And Bo Horvat comes up next. I'm just going to read the statement he put out this week. I'm focused on this season and playing for the Vancouver Canucks, helping the team any way that I can. I will not have any further comments this year about my future. Bo Horvat, mind you, a UFA after this season. What do you think about whatever the hell is going on in Vancouver now?
Well, there's a great irony here, right? When you put out that statement, you actually fuel the fire.
You do.
And you give everyone more license to talk about it and speculate. You're going to see it. If you watch the TSN quiz tonight, there's going to be a Bo Horvat question on there for the panelists. And that probably wouldn't be the case if that statement didn't come out this week, as an example. And it's not just at TSN, it's everywhere. But in saying that, Bo Horvat's kind of in a no-win situation. He'd rather let his play do the talking. He would have rather had this contract, situation resolved before puck drop on this season. He's having a great year production-wise. I appreciate that he doesn't want to talk about it. And, you're hoping to quell everything by putting that out there. I mean, maybe, just maybe, doing that means he's not going to field the questions, but it's only going to fuel more conversation around him. And I just don't think there's any way around that. I mean, you play in a Canadian market, you're the captain of the team, you've got 20 goals before Christmas, and
21 goals.
And exactly, but you don't have a contract beyond this season. I mean, this is how it works. There's been lots of players before, Mark Stone dealt with this. Erik Karlsson dealt with this when they were in Ottawa, and the team was obviously going in a certain direction. It just kind of is what it is. And, I don't fault them for putting out the statement, but I also think like, oh man, you're unintentionally now giving it more life. And the truth is the Canucks are very much testing the market on them. They're going to go out and see who's interested, what they might get. It doesn't mean they can't trade them. It doesn't mean they're guaranteed to trade him. It doesn't mean that there's maybe not a last-ditch effort when we get into February, maybe to attempt to re-sign him. Because remember, there's a pretty big pivot on JT Miller. If we had recorded a show in Montreal during the draft in July, I would have said 100% for sure JT Miller is being traded. I mean, he was being shopped at that point in time, and then it got to early September. The Canucks pivoted and signed him to a long-term deal. So I don't think there's anything to suggest that can happen here. But this is the good and the bad of playing in Canada is that when you're as good as Bo Horvat is, and you're in this situation where, he's turned down a contract here in recent weeks from the team. Now the team is shopping him. I mean, we're going to talk. I mean, I guarantee you this won't be the last time we address him on this podcast. Oh
no. You can put him and Brock Besser right near the top of, what was the name of the trading boat? Oh, wow. I completely forgot the name of the great trade segment that we would do at almost every opportunity we could last season. No. Yeah.
We'll bring it back in January, bud.
We will. And maybe my brain will work better then too, because for whatever reason, I just completely blanked on the name. I almost said trade bait.
Just relax over the holidays. We'll sharpen up by early January, and it's still too soon, right? On Monday, the trade freeze kicks in, or the holiday roster freeze in the NHL, it's called. And no moves can basically made for a 10-day period over Christmas to just about New Year's. I think come January is when the focus and the attention will shift to who's being dealt.
Oh, 100%. And we'll be up on that with so many players and very much a lot of active teams who will want to get themselves involved. I think that's going to do it in terms of topics. We have now reached the stick taps portion of our show. This is where we show some love, some praise to someone this week. We could use the cross-check option if we so choose, but I know for myself, I want to use stick taps this week. Siege, do you want to start or should I start?
You go ahead.
I would like to, a bit bittersweet, but I would like to give some stick taps to Chris Snow and his family, the Flames assistant GM, who has been battling ALS for the last 3 years. His wife, Kelsey, has been providing updates on his condition. He was on a ventilator last we checked. He was on it to begin, I think, last week, then was off it, but has since been placed back on. It should go without saying that a lot of members of the Calgary Flames media, of the organization, obviously, and people around the hockey world are thinking of Chris Snow at this time. I have not had a chance to really meet him, but just by all accounts, he comes across as a very good person. And with such a great story, just the fact that he was someone who was given a year to live after his diagnosis and has turned it into a continued opportunity to this point. I think it is a remarkable story. So I just want to take the moment just to just give my thoughts to Chris and his family as he's going through what he is going through. And I'm pulling for him. And everyone else is pulling for him. So that's mine.
Snowy Strong. I first met him at the 2004 World Cup of Hockey when he was a hockey journalist.
Wow.
And obviously crossed paths with him a bunch over the years. We're about the same age. What a career to start as a journalist and end up working a long time in the Minnesota Wild front office, and then been with the Flames for a period of time here. But more importantly, as a beautiful family, and I have nothing but respect for how they've shared his illness publicly. And, I can't imagine that's easy. But they've done a lot of good with that, and I second all the good wishes you're sending his way. As for my stick tap, I'm going to go a little off the board and give it to Gary Bettman. the commissioner that everyone
Interesting.
has made popular to hate. But as he celebrated 30 years this week, since he was first elected commissioner of the NHL, he was the first commissioner of the NHL. It's hard to deny the growth the league has seen under his watch. How much better of a place the league has been in. It's not an easy job. It won't be an easy job for, hasn't been an easy job for whoever did it before him. For whoever his successor eventually will be, won't be an easy job. And what's crazy about this is that if and when Gary Bettman gets into early May in the job, he'll actually then be the most tenured leader at the top of the league in history, surpassing Clarence Campbell. So, I mean, it's a pretty amazing run. I know there's been lots of times I've questioned him or criticized him. I mean, it's part of the nature of both of our jobs, but that's quite a time at the top of the league. And I must say, it was really hammered home to me this week being at the Board of Governors meeting, just how much more stable the place is in right now, financially and as a business. And I'm hoping for good things ahead, because it is a great league, and it's helped giving me my livelihood and a lot of joy to my life too.
Absolutely. And with mine as well. Very interesting stick tap. I know some people might wonder, like, are you sure about that? But I can understand where you're coming from with that viewpoint. Yeah, that's going to do it for stick taps this week.
Are you going to turn around and add a cross check to Bettman just to give a counterpoint, or what are you going to do?
No, I'm not. You know what? I'm not going to do that. Of course, look, I mean, you also mentioned it too. Like, he's open he opens himself for criticism, and that's part of our jobs. But I feel as if we've debated enough on this Thursday edition.
This has been an ornery version of the CJ show.
Yeah, and I hope no one thinks that, like, oh, we're purposely sniping at each other and there's like disdain. It's like, no, this is very good, healthy discussion to have. I like this. But yeah, I'm tapped out on discussions. I'm gonna go back to my bed and sleep. But for everyone else, thank you so much for watching and listening to this podcast. Get your questions in now for Ask CJ for our Monday show. If you're tweeting at CJ Reporter Chris, use the hashtag Ask CJ when you write in your question. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long, and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet?
Inside the Game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter at Reporter Chris. And follow Julian McKenzie at JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.